Even the ordinary, hateful man holding her hand next to her looked much more handsome. Come to think of it, if a man is lucky enough to hold the hand of such a beautiful girl, even if he has a pig's head, it must be a rather unique and intelligent one. Perseus simply couldn't stand the strange looks those guys were giving him. Provoking him like that won't lead to anything good. He turned and kissed Ivaisa on the cheek, eliciting cries of despair from the crowd. Ivaisa didn't react to his prank. Others thought she was untainted by worldly affairs and didn't bother with villains. Actually, she just felt that compared to someone's past terrible behavior, a kiss on the cheek was nothing to make a fuss about. Today's grand event is massive in scale, attracting not only the upper echelons of the capital's aristocratic circles, but also many people from other parts of the country and even abroad, resulting in the capital being overcrowded. At this time, all the carriages and drivers in the carriage shop were taken. In order to avoid leading the nymph through the crowd to the venue, Perseus had no choice but to use his forbidden power. "My dear, you've finally arrived. We've kept you waiting for so long." Helen greeted him warmly, lifting the sedan curtain. He lives off his wife. Perseus helped Ivaisa into the carriage, only to discover that besides Helen and her maid Nora, there were two other people inside. One is that arrogant and domineering bitch made from the Van Tlesi family. One is the mistress of this whore's maid, Miss Lovia herself. The master and servant looked very unhappy when they saw him, and turned their heads away, not wanting to see him at all. "My cousin's boyfriend got dumped, so I'm the only one left to be paired with her." "Mr. Boyfriend, you don't mind, do you?" Helen said with a smile. "I don't mind," Perseus said calmly. "I apologize again, Miss Lovia. I really didn't mean it." "Shut up. I don't want to hit anyone today." Lovia's face was greener than if she had swallowed a fly. "Okowo." Perseus, holding Ivaisa, sat down next to Nora. "Darling, hugging another woman in front of others, you really don't respect me as your girlfriend at all," Helen said with a half-smile. "During this special period, I think this space is very cramped. If more people come, there might not be enough room to sit." A perfect excuse. "All right, Helen, tell the driver to drive. The sooner we get there, the sooner I can be free," Lovia said calmly. "Okay, cousin." At Helen's command, the carriage started moving. This time, the ceremony was not held in the palace, but in the square in front of it. Invited guests may go to the viewing platform to watch the ceremony. Even minor nobles or commoners who didn't receive an invitation could still gather together to watch the spectacle. A platform higher than the viewing platform, where the dog emperor sat on his throne. He was dressed in heavy imperial robes, wearing a crown on his head, and holding not a scepter, but a crystal longsword. He sat there solemnly, looking down at all his subjects. Surrounding the throne are his family members, the core members of the royal family. Crown Prince Andrei was among those present, but his gaze remained fixed on Ivaisa, who was standing next to Perseus on the viewing platform, showing no regard for the occasion. His younger brother and sister were next to him. Currently, the only one whose name the general public knows is the second prince, Prince Sila, who is a very handsome young man with a very friendly smile. The remaining children were all very young. The youngest one was being held by his mother. That was the Empress of the Empire standing on the other side of the throne, a woman of unparalleled beauty who could easily fulfill everyone's imagination of the role of an empress. Even for many older nobles, her image remained a mystery. It's unclear whether she herself dislikes public appearances or whether His Majesty the Emperor intentionally conceals her. Standing next to the queen was a somewhat uneasy noble girl. She seemed unaccustomed to her current height and the feeling of being looked up to by everyone in the room. That was Andrei's female companion. To be honest, her status might not be low, but she wasn't very pretty, at least not as pretty as Lovia in every way. It was as if she had been temporarily brought in to make up the numbers. And that is indeed the case. Lovia would occasionally stare at the innocent girl with murderous intent, and then at the not-so-innocent Perseus with the same look. Helen, standing next to Lovia, covered her mouth to stifle a laugh. After the ceremony, the nobles would go to the palace for a banquet, which was the social event they were looking forward to. But now, they can only stand obediently on the viewing platform and wait in silence. After an unknown amount of time, the bells on the distant tower rang out, their deep, resonant sound echoing throughout the entire capital, startling countless birds into flight. The emperor rose from his throne, his crystal sword pointing at the sun, the sword gleaming with a dazzling light. "Begin," the emperor commanded in a deep voice. Countless bugles sounded simultaneously, a death knell that left countless foreign troops lying dead on the battlefield. The faces of the foreign envoys present immediately turned grim. Then, the sound of horses' hooves rang out. Countless hooves trampled the earth, dust billowed, and the sound grew louder as it approached, like an earthquake that was gradually intensifying. Following the sound, everyone looked straight ahead. There are wide streets heavily guarded by the fully armed Imperial Guard, stretching all the way to the outermost edge of the capital. Fortunately, those who received the title did not need to travel that far. They could simply start from where the city wall had been. So, riding a tall horse and dressed in military attire, Kutu quickly appeared before everyone. Among those present were many seasoned generals of the empire, yet none of them could remain composed in front of that man. Instantly, the previously noisy scene fell silent. Chapter 84 Fiefdom. If the Kutu dressed in animal skins is a wild and untamed war king, then the Kutu now fully displays his majestic and authoritative demeanor as a ruler. As a demi-human, no matter how many achievements he makes, there will still be some self-righteous people who regard him as a savage and inferior animal. There were quite a few guys like that present. However, he simply looked straight ahead, not even glancing at the strange-looking noblemen and ladies. None of them dared to voice their true thoughts, which was truly astonishing in its power and domineering presence. Today, in the most powerful human nation on the Western continent, he is the absolute protagonist. Following him were his tribal brothers who had fought alongside him in all directions. They were all clad in armor, their fierce aura like dark clouds covering the hearts of everyone who looked at them, their blood-red eyes flashing with bloodthirsty glints. Compared to these roughnecks, Luna seems much cuter. She strutted arrogantly on the back of a white tiger, glaring fiercely at everyone. If anyone avoided her gaze, she would burst into laughter. That tiger was clearly a high-ranking magical beast, and it was obviously not a docile and harmless pet, but a monster that could tear its prey's throat apart at any time, with a ferocious look on its face. Perseus had no intention of attracting Luna's attention. He wanted his little dog to fully enjoy this moment of being the center of attention. However, he was still discovered. "Perseus!" Luna shouted excitedly and left the group without hesitation. She patted the tiger's head and whispered something. The tiger then intelligently ran to the stands where Perseus was, carried Luna, and leaped up. Amidst the terrified screams of the crowd, it easily conquered the nearly 3-story-high railing, clinging to it as if it were about to collapse. Those in the same stands were so frightened they fell over and huddled in a corner, their faces ashen as they stared at the tiger. The tiger got annoyed by the stares of those people and let out a low growl. The roar of the beast made both men and women scream involuntarily. The screams even drowned out the rousing music from the other side, and everyone, including the Emperor and Cthulhu, turned to look. However, the two most important people at the scene only glanced at it and then acted as if nothing had happened. "What are you yelling for? If you yell again, I'll have Little White eat you all." Luna threatened them fiercely. The big tiger named Xiaobai bared its teeth in a very cooperative manner. Many people immediately fled, leaving only Perseus and a few others in the stands. Only after clearing out a large area did the tiger jump in. "You're being naughty again." Perseus ruffled Luna's hair helplessly. Luna chuckled, got off the tiger, and jumped onto Perseus. Little White sniffed Perseus, then laid down at his feet, lazily yawned, and began to sleep. This thing is not small at all. Just standing on 4 legs, its shoulders reach Perseus's chest, and with its neck and head, it is almost as tall as him. That gaping maw was so large that it would be no exaggeration to say it could bite off the head of an adult man in one bite. So it's no wonder those people were scared. Even Perseus himself was experiencing leg cramps. However powerful this tiger may be, it is still Luna's property. Luna is his again. So this tiger belongs to him too. With this in mind, Perseus was no longer afraid. Wow, what an adorable little tiger. Helen walked over with great interest, squatted down next to Little White, and stroked its head. Xiaobai opened his eyes unhappily, looked at Helenine, and his fierce gaze instantly froze. "Hee. Be careful, Sister Helen. Little White is very fierce. It has eaten a lot of bad guys." Luna looked at her smugly. Then she noticed something was wrong with Xiaobai and frowned. "Xiaobai, are you cold? Why are you shivering?" Little White suddenly sprang up, fled to a corner, curled up into a fluffy ball, looking very weak and pitiful. Perseus watched this unfold, and his guts twitched slightly. It doesn't seem to like me very much, Helen said with a regretful expression. Little White seems to be sick. Luna released Perseus and ran to Little White's side, gently comforting it. After a long time, Little White finally stopped shaking, but no matter what Luna said, it refused to come over and remained curled up in a ball, looking pitiful. Luna walked over, looking confused. Xiaobai might not be used to living in the capital yet. What a lovely big guy. Why didn't we see it when we visited your house last time? Helen asked with a smile. Little White had been staying in a military camp until yesterday, when some uncles brought it over. I missed it so much. Luna's face was flushed with joy. Such a powerful magical beast is very rare. It's truly rare that Lovia, who had been observing coldly, actually chimed in. Indeed, the magical beasts of this era were mostly insignificant weaklings, with combat strength similar to that of ordinary animals. It was rare to find even one that could rival a third-tier mage. You must know that in the very past, some of the most powerful monsters were even able to challenge the gods. Luna and Lovia weren't familiar with each other, but she still enthusiastically introduced the little white dog to Perseus, saying, Little White was brought back by my dad when I was little. He said it was very rare and that I could keep it if I liked it, so I kept it. What would happen if we didn't stay? Helen asked. Tiger meat is hard to eat, so we have to throw it away. But the skin could be used to make clothes for babies. Luna thought about it seriously. Everyone was at a loss for words. Where can I get the same ones? I want the cubs. Price is no problem, Lovia asked. As far as I know, there are only people like Xiaobai deep in the forest in my hometown, but only my dad dares to go in there. Even if several of my other uncles go together, something terrible will happen. Lovia didn't continue. Given Kutu's current status and position, it's certainly not something that could be hired simply by offering money. But she still looked at Xiaobai in the corner with a very peculiar gaze. Perseus's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that this woman likes furry animals? Over there, the uninterrupted ceremony finally reached its climax. Kutu ascended the high platform and came before the emperor. He should have knelt on one knee to receive the title, but he showed no intention of kneeling and stood upright. There was a stir in the room, with many people dissatisfied with his arrogant and haughty attitude. But the emperor showed no sign of anger and loudly proclaimed, In the name of the 12th emperor of the Zelenria Empire, I hereby confer upon Kutu the title of Imperial Duke in recognition of his outstanding contributions to the empire. His fiefdom extends from the Gayuge Plain in the west to the Kremiso Mountains in the east, from the Great Sweet Lake in the north to the Void Forest in the south, encompassing 2 prefectures and 17 cities. May his glory be as immortal as the sun and moon, and may the gods and the spirits of all previous emperors bear witness to it. Then he lightly tapped Kutu's shoulder 3 times with his sword. Crown Prince Andre approached carrying a golden tray with a tree branch and a handful of soil, symbolizing a portion of the empire's territory. The emperor took the tray and solemnly handed it to Kutu. After Kutul took an oath to demonstrate his loyalty to the empire and the emperor, a salute was fired, and the ceremony concluded successfully. The people of the capital were in a frenzy of jubilation, cheering the names of the emperor and Kutulku, creating a very enthusiastic atmosphere. The nobles, however, reacted rather coldly. On the one hand, they were not happy to see a demi-human ascend to such a high position. On the other hand, the vast territory that the emperor had just granted to Kutul was all originally belonging to the Effelin family. Chapter 85 Lovia's Thoughts. That dog emperor really knows how to do business. They had just seized back the Effelin family's fiefdoms when they immediately gave them to someone else. Without spending a single penny, he completed a new round of reshuffling of imperial power. Perseus glanced silently at Ivisa. Although she remained expressionless and said nothing, her feelings must have been somewhat complicated, right? Unaware of what had happened, Luna felt a huge sense of relief. Finally over. I am exhausted. When are we going to eat? No one answered. Everyone was looking at Ivisa, even from the other stands. Ivisa frowned slightly. Now that the ceremony is over, let's go downstairs and wait for dinner. Perseus put his arm around Ivisa's shoulder and led her through the door. Okay. Luna skipped and hopped, beckoning Xiaobai to follow. Little White had wanted to run away for a long time. It glanced at Helen with trembling eyes and then darted ahead with a whoosh. Only